Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at PenelopeGate, the wife of François Fillon, who has been embroiled, along with two of his children, in what's now an ever-widening scandal, with up to 1 million euros paid out over many years as a parliamentary assistant. Investigators are probing because she was not seen at the National Assembly at any point doing any actual parliamentary assistance work. With us, Charles Becbédé, Conservative Municipal Councillor in Paris's 8th arrondissement. Welcome back to Laura Slimani, spokesperson for Socialist presidential candidate Benoît Hamon, hails from the left of the party. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more
from the party
about that, whether the left has gone mainstream. We're also with Émeric Merlot, regional councillor in the Loire Valley for the far-right National Front Party. Welcome back. And Paul Moreira, who heads TV production company and press agency Première Ligne. Just before the break, Paul, you were mentioning François Fillon's continued work as a consultant working for a corporate consulting firm.
Exactly.
The investigative website Mediapart listing his fees, generous fees over the last few years. And you're saying the problem is he should have resigned
or at
from
least
that
he should disclose exactly what he's doing. We know, for example, that he will be speaking at an event in Kazakhstan in September, this September 2017, organized by a gas corporation of Kazakhstan. So, I mean, maybe it's very interesting for the corporate people of the gas companies of Kazakhstan to hear what François Fillon has to say. But I think that any political man, I'm not talking about Mr. Fillon in particular, but any political man has to disclose any kind of conflict of interest situations that could come about, because in the future it may be a problem.
Charles,
sure, but I think he will do. He probably has
should he
already
have
done so.
From that consultancy at this point, or at least suspended his...
He was in the opposition, he's
but he still hasn't stepped
to
attend
conferences, being invited all around the world.
So let's be open about it.
Clinton did, like Sarkozy did. There is no blame on that.
Yeah.
He will be transparent on that. I'm sure.
There's a need for transparency.
If he's elected president, I'm not sure he will attend to this conference in Kazakhstan.
So the problem is that he actually created this firm just after being a prime minister and just before being a deputy, because it's forbidden to create it during those two times. Mm-hmm. So I think there is something here unclear. Of course it's legal. Once again, it's legal. But, it's still a problem. And I don't think... the deputy actually earn money, public money, so that they could be independent. They don't need to have more money. And I think what we are seeing here, it's a huge problem between the Republican Party and money, and such with Big Malion or other...
I mean, I'm sorry, but
yeah, it's true.
I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't be too... incisive on vocal on the question, because
tell me,
maybe we're going to talk next about the accusations.
Let's talk about it now. Let's talk about it now.
I just want to say one thing on the transparency thing, because what we have here is indeed a potential big conflict of interest. Who paid Mr. Fillon? Are these companies or people who will then try to have an influence on the policy that will be led regarding labor law, regarding the question of energy, etc., etc. These are massive democratic questions, and there has to be transparency, as there has to be transparency on who funds the campaign of the candidates that are running for the presidential election. And I want to remind that Emmanuel Macron always disagreed and refused to disclose who his donors are.
Emmanuel Macron, that independent candidate. Let's just remind our viewers, a new poll conducted Monday, Tuesday, among more than 1,000 citizens knocks François Fillon out of the second round of the presidential election. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen would lead after round one against former economy minister Emmanuel Macron, who Laura just mentioned. He's running as an independent. Voters so far seem unfazed that the National Front leader is also embroiled in a parliamentary payroll scandal. Her refusal to pay back nearly 300,000 euros paid to members on her staff at the European Parliament, staff who include her personal bodyguard. Diptyque Laurent has the story.
They've been part of Marine Le Pen's entourage for years and allegedly have been paid unlawfully out of EU funds. Now the French far-right leader has refused to pay back nearly 300,000 euros to the EU Parliament. She's accused of paying an aide, Catherine Griset, as an EU Parliament assistant between 2010 and 2016, when she was carrying out work not related to EU affairs at the Front National party headquarters. In addition, Le Pen is due to reimburse some 40,000 euros in February after hiring Thierry Légier in 2011 as a parliamentary assistant, when he was in fact working as a bodyguard for the Front National party. Le Pen was given a month to provide proof of their work, but she failed to do so. In total, she has been ordered to pay back 339,000 euros for the fake jobs. Le Pen has blamed political opponents in Parliament for the scandal and argued that it doesn't make sense to separate her EU Parliament work from her party activities. Nevertheless, the Parliament will dock her pay by 50% until the full amount is recovered. Serious financial blow for the leader of a party that is struggling to finance her presidential campaign. Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, ran into similar issues with the EU Parliament in June. He too was accused of misusing resources and ordered to repay 320,000 euros.
Émeric Merlot, why was she pretending that the bodyguard was a parliamentary assistant?
He was a local assistant apparently during the North region, but this was many years ago.
But not an assistant to the parliament in Brussels.
But no, because it was a local assistant and not working there as in the parliament, because there are two different statuses. But it's a bit complicated. This is not the same problem. I can see that there are all the media and even political sphere. He's making a link between François Fillon and Marine Le Pen about this problem, but it's nothing to do with it. It was declared jobs. It was not fake jobs.
It was still public money.
It was declared jobs and not fake jobs. And plus, there is a huge difference as well, is that the Olaf, the organism which is actually charging Marine Le Pen, is not a jurisdiction. It's nothing to do with justice. It's a political instrument, and so that when Marine Le Pen actually answered to the Olaf organism, it's Martin Schulz, the president of the European Parliament, who actually answered to her and said, "Okay, I received your papers." So I think here it's a big political scandal, more about the fact that we are actually, I would say, trying to disturb the European Union and European work, because, as you know, we are clear on that. We don't want the European Union to have such powers. So,
Paul Moira?
The problem is, from what I understood, the lady was not working for the European Parliament, but was working for the National Front. So basically, her assistant, quote unquote, was using public money, which is my money, your money, to do a job which is working for a party that I don't support. So I don't see why I should, with my money, having an assistant that works for them. I'd rather have her work as an assistant in the European Parliament. It's as simple as that. I mean, maybe you can argue that it's politically oriented. Maybe everything is politically oriented, but still the facts are...
First, it's not justice. Once again, it's important because it's not a jurisdiction who actually condemned Marine Le Pen. It's the European Parliament first. And Catherine Griset is her chief of staff. So obviously, it's an assistant, a chief of staff, okay? And everybody who tried to reach to Marine Le Pen know Catherine Griset because she's assisting her all the time. And as a chief of staff, because Marine Le Pen is certainly, yes, a European Parliament, but she's also the leader of Front National. Everybody say that. So the chief of staff actually go with her on when she's where she's going in France, where she's going as being a deputy. So there is no problem with that.
Yes,
I don't understand.
Yes, there is, because there are very clear rules to the way you can use the money that you get as an MEP to pay your assistants. They have to be working a certain amount of their time on European issues, for instance, when you're at the local level, let me finish, please. When you're at the local level, you have to be issuing newsletter about what your MEP is doing at the European Parliament. You have to issue documents to report about what the person is doing. You have to organize meetings with people so that the MEP, as an MEP, meets them to talk about what they do in the Parliament. It's very clear what they have to do, and clearly that's not what she did, and that's not what the driver did, because a driver is not within the missions that are included with what the Parliament's money should pay.
No, I don't agree with you.
I mean, you're right. It's not the same. It's not the same thing.
There is a big issue here.
But it is still the money of Europeans, and they don't have to pay for your propaganda and the propaganda of your party.
What strikes me also is that this you're talking about this Olaf organization. We were talking about transparency in professional activities of people involved in politics. this foundation and many other non-government organizations are totally not transparent in their financing means. And many are linked with your camp, by the way. And not your camp, the camp of Mr. Slimani. We are discovering, for instance, that the famous fund manager, Mr. Soros, is funding many organizations that are very close to your party and your camp. You know perfectly well.
No, I don't know what you mean, and I think that everyone wants to know what you mean.
I'm always afraid when I hear the word Soros, because it's always linked with conspiracy theories. You know, the Soros is financing this and financing that.
Have a look on the web, you will see.
It's amazing how every time there is an accusation, whether it's from the National Front or for you, your party, it's because of the others. It's the socialist plot, you know?
Let's be transparent.
I mean, I think you give us much more responsibility than we have and much more importance than we have. The problem is that the people who are leading both of your parties have problems with money. And you can't say that François Fillon has a problem with money and then with public money. Yes, with public money. And I mean, and to be frank, and I'm going to give you that one, it's not, we have had socialist people who have had a problem with money.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, and that's why we need transparency, and that's why I think
let's get back to the original question.
She didn't earn money. Marine Le Pen didn't earn money.
Is something changing in France in that regards? Because, for instance, having family members on the payroll is not allowed at the European Parliament level. Things that are considered, well, you know, France has got a Latin culture. We do things a little bit differently. There was that big MP's expenses scandal in the UK a few years back, and things have changed there. Will things change in France after what's going on now?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. The problem is France has a DNA of opacity. Really, it's deeply ingrained in this country, probably because some ugly things happened during the Second World War in terms of collaboration and everything, and the state kind of shaded off a lot of his activities. I mean, the stuff like a Freedom of Information Act, which is a normal law in the United States, when you can ask for administrative documents, even sensitive ones. In France, it does not exist. It's ruled by the Prime Minister, the right to have access to documents or not. It's not an independent decision by the justice. So there is deeply in this country the use of shades to protect the administrative powers and the governments from the citizen eyes. And I think definitely that's something that has to evolve, and France has to reach the level of the other democracies. I'm talking about England, that changed their laws 10 years ago. I'm talking United States, Sweden, and we have to go towards this direction. And I think we can agree on that we're really backward on this topic.
So at the end of the day, will all of this, though, be it with what's happening with Marine Le Pen or what's happening with François Fillon, will this have an impact on the race at the end of the day? It seems to be having an impact for Fillon, but not for Marine Le Pen, if you look at the polls.
Is that the same thing?
It's correct. So far, Marine Le Pen has not been as impacted as. But the thing is, I'm not into this investigation, so it's difficult for me to give information of the way it's found. But obviously, there are waves. There are more and more information. Day after day, new stuff comes about. So about Marine Le Pen, so far, the new stuff is the 300,000 euros that she should be refunding to the European Parliament. But that's the only thing. Maybe other things will come out.
It's a story we were talking about since like a year.
It's coming to a head now because it's as of this month that she's being docked her pay.
Yeah, but why will she pay? She's now charging the European Parliament, and now let's see what's going on, okay?
All right, Charles Becbeder, let me ask you, because the runoff of the presidential election, if you find yourself, a bit like we saw with the Austrian presidential election, a situation where you could have both of the mainstream parties shut out of the second round. Why is that?
Well, it would be a problem for democracy, I think, although, of course... we'll see, but I really think after this disastrous quinquennate, I'm not sure,
5 years of
François Hollande, we need an alternance with a reasonable reform plan on security, frontiers, public spending.
But we see, all right, we're not going to go over what we talked about in part one of our discussion, there's dissension within the socialist ranks, there's dissension within the center-rights ranks. We heard from that MP who supports Nicolas Sarkozy. undermining a bit the candidate. Why is it that the two huge parties, which are suddenly weak at this point?
The Socialist Party is weak due to this disastrous 5 years that just passed. But the right side is strong. We have at the moment a storm. Okay, it's a mediatic storm. But let's bet that in 2 weeks' time, this stuff will be behind us, and we will then be able to have a serene debate of ideas.
Is it going to blow over?
I mean, I think it will depend whether François Fillon will be convincing on his innocence, and then we'll have to deal with the moral and ethical question, which I think is even bigger. But just on this issue of the mainstream parties and why they're weaker than they used to be. And first of all, it's not only a French issue; it's an issue that you can see at the European level. And I think this questions the ability of, at least from my for the left. I think it questions our ability to be an alternative to the current economic system that creates more inequalities and that generates, for instance, more hatred towards immigrants when we should embody something different. And I think that this is what the left, to a certain extent, has failed to do over the past 5 years.
The left hasn't been left enough.
That's also why the left-wing electorate decided to choose a candidate that embodied this alternative. And I hope that this will allow us, and I think the dynamic that we are seeing now in the polls are showing that this is something that people on the left side want. And I hope that it will allow us to stop the dynamic of Marine Le Pen and to create a more open society.
Same dynamic as in the UK, same dynamic as in the United States, sort of a polarization, a crystallization. Voters seem to want their right wing to be right wing and their left wing to be left wing.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also a sign, a symptom of the fact that people voted for François Hollande 5 years ago, and I think that they voted because they said, my enemy is the finances, I'm going to redistribute wealth, and I'm going to do this and that. And then after he went to power, and more or less he did what a right-wing politician would have done. And so that crystallized a lot of people, and there's also this populist trend that is based on the fact that after 20 years of globalization, it seemed to have brought about more poverty in the developed countries than wealth. And we're facing that.
On the agenda Thursday, the winner of last Sunday's primaries, Benoît Hamon, will be meeting the outgoing socialist president. François Hollande has kept a low profile throughout the primaries of the left. Benoît Hamon got the endorsement from Prime Minister Cazeneuve 24 hours after his win. Many inside the party, though, say they're not ready yet to vote for a candidate who is that far to the left. Some, like the mayor of Lyon, are gravitating towards Emmanuel Macron, who was asked about what sets him apart from his former fellow cabinet member.
I have a lot of respect for Benoît Hamon, but we do not share the same beliefs, and I don't think he reflects progressive values. Because to be a progressive, you must offer a model where you produce and then you redistribute. In Benoît Hamon's program, he doesn't explain how we're going to produce. And that's a real problem. He does a great job explaining how to redistribute wealth that we've forgotten how to produce, how to redistribute.
Benoît, let me ask you about this because, again, Emmanuel Macron, he was in a socialist government, and the right is saying he's a socialist, and yet he seems to be picking off votes from both sides. Are the political fault lines no longer the same as before? It isn't left versus right. It's something different.
Absolutely. I mean, Macron is definitely a child of Hollande's 5 year of government. He blurred the lines between right and left, and Macron is probably a very good technician, I guess, because he has been doing technician work. But he tries very, very harshly not to be identified as on ideological lines, which means he's right wing.
even though this morning, I think now he's making his program clearer and his manifesto clearer, and you can see the clearly neoliberal influences within his economic program, and I think that doesn't put him on the left side of the spectrum.
Who would you rather face, Emmanuel Macron or François Fillon?
Well, voters will decide, but at least I hope we'll have a a real debate about what's very important about presidential election in France, which is the place of France within the European Union or not, about the migrants, about immigration, about the fact that our country is more and more divided between cities and countryside, and this kind of question. And I think we are losing a lot of time with François Fillon and all those programs. And we would like us to actually talk about the programs. So Marine Le Pen this weekend will be in Lyon.
Okay.
And
Charles Becbédère.
Fully agree. We are losing a lot of time with this storm around Fillon. I would like a match between François Fillon and Emmanuel Macron. In fact, because sorry for that, but because at the end it's important that people that are electing the president, they choose on the program, and then Fillon will if he wins, will implement the reforms, and the syndicate, the unions which will fight against these reforms, it's sure. Will not be able to say, Mr. Fillon, you have not been elected for your program. You have been elected to beat Mrs. Le Pen, and that I want to avoid.
We're going to leave it there. Charles Becbédère, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Émeric Merlot. I also want to thank Paul Moreira and Laura Slimani. Stay with us, though. It's time for Media Watch. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there. Yes, been taking a look at the many and varied things that people are talking about when it comes to French politics. I think rarely has it been so closely watched, certainly internationally speaking. But starting off with a cartoon from a French cartoonist, Nard. He's wondering whether fellow Republicans are going to stand with François Fillon. That translates basically, faire bloc derrière means standing behind. So he's saying the right standing behind Fillon, but of course, a bit of wordplay there because there's a block of concrete about to fall on his head. Now, if we take a look at Politico, they're asking how bad is it for Fillon, this whole issue of PenelopeGate. And according to this article, they've spoken to a senior party official who has said, I would use the Titanic cliche, except there's no band playing. According to this, his allies are getting very uneasy, verging on desperate, largely because of his choice of defence, which is, I haven't done anything wrong, there's just this conspiracy against me and it's all about my enemies. And it does sound worryingly a little bit like Donald Trump, blaming everybody else for what's going wrong for him.
Was it the wrong line of defense at the outset? Because he plays the victim, but the guy owns a chateau and his wife's paid 7,000 euros a month.
No, I think it
worked for Trump.
We'll see. I think it's a good strategy because that's in line with his personality.
OK, well, taking a look at some other reactions, Bruno Jeudi of Paris Match has been digging around and he thinks that the sharks are circling because there have been a number of websites created in recent days. First out of the blocks, BARBERO. 2017. That was done on the 27th of January.
These are all the leaders within the party.
These are all people who are being touted as possible replacements, Barouin, Wauquiez and Bertrand. The other two waited until yesterday to create their websites. We'll wait and see whether or not they do actually launch a campaign at any point. If I could get my mouse to work, I will show you what else we have. Here we go. Again, a sort of nod to vultures circling, Wauquiez, Barouin and others supporting Fillon. It must warm his heart, says this Twitter user, clearly not thinking there's too much support there for him. They say that Fillon is honest and a man of integrity, but they are ready to replace him. And there are the three main suspects again with their new website names underneath.
It's a joke, but
yeah.
And again, plenty of jokes around. Plan B is a hashtag that has been everywhere in France recently. I think this one's fairly unlikely, a return of Jacques Chirac. Kim Jong-un, a spoof account for him, is even getting in on the act, saying, the people have called on me to replace Fillon. There's no other plan B than me. If we take a look at France Info has come up with a number of tweets, 10 tweets that they say could come back to haunt François Fillon. And one of the reasons possibly why this scandal could hurt him more is because he's always been seen as Mr. Clean. And the kind of tweets that we're talking about are these. In 30 years, my name's never been associated with any kind of unethical case or business or matter of behaviour. Another tweet from him: to govern a country, my belief is that you have to be irreproachable. Now, that was only in September 2016, so very recently, that one. Paris Match has been looking at the polls. They've carried out their own poll, and what they say is that while Fillon has basically turned off, Hamon has taken off. And although Hamon is still trailing him, he hasn't overtaken him, that really would be quite a coup. They've got Marine Le Pen on 24%. François Fillon still making it through to the second round in this one with 21%, but Emmanuel Macron right behind with 20%. And taking a look at this one, this is another poll tweeted by Florian Philippot, the Vice President of the National Front. He's very pleased because this has Marine Le Pen well out, comfortably in front.
This is the first round that we're talking
about.
Oh,
absolutely. This is the first round. Two different possibilities in terms of who's running here, but both times she's well ahead, 26 and 27%. And in this case, Emmanuel Macron would be through to the second round, not François Fillon.
But of course, if there's one lesson we've learned in the past years, which is take the polls with a grain of salt.
Absolutely.
Emma James, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panel. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. All right.